Another controversial decision by the FIA. So this is what we're going to be looking at today, as the FIA managed to put themselves yet again in the negative connotation of things, thanks to the way that they've handled a situation after the Japanese GP ended. Many thought that the FIA did the wrong thing when it came to awarding Verstappen his second consecutive championship, but after going through the details of their own rules, it became evident that the FIA did the right thing. Still, the fact that they had to talk yet again and explain as to why Verstappen was the 2022 champion brought another controversy behind his title, and in this video we're going to explain why the decision itself was controversial, but yet the right one to make. Max Verstappen was crowned world champion for the second consecutive year in a row after he had had a dominant season all along. Even if the full points weren't awarded after the Japanese GP, Verstappen would have likely won it in one of the next events, as the competition was nowhere near him throughout the season. Still, the FIA had to yet again explain themselves as to why things were done the way they were and why they gave the full points when one of the articles clearly says that in a situation where the race isn't completed 100%, reduced points are given to the competitors. This is something that confused Red Bull and Verstappen too, but there is one part that just clarifies it all, and in this video you're going to understand why the FIA did the right thing, although they were heavily bashed for it. Let's go through the race and explain to you what happened so that you can understand why the decision was made the way it was. For starters, the Suzuka GP was a very challenging one due to the heavy rain that was present on the track. Still, the race started and Sainz aquaplaned and spun out onto the track. This required not only presence of the safety car, but the presence of the recovery vehicle that had to take away Sainz's car off the track. Gasly nearly crashed with the recovery vehicle, as we were very close to seeing an incident that took away Bianchi's life at this very same track in 2024. One would think that the FIA hasn't learned anything from their own mistakes, but luckily nothing happened. The race started and after 3 laps it was suspended. The heavy rain has also made it impossible for the drivers to race yet again, which was something that interfered with the timeline that an F1 race needs to finish under. For us, the 3 most important things to understand are 3 articles, and they are Article 57, Article 5.4 and Article 6.5. Let's start with Article 57. That says that if competitors or officials are placed in immediate physical danger by cars running on the track and the clerk of the course deems circumstances such that the track cannot be negotiated safely, even behind a safety car, the sprint race or the race will be suspended. Should it become necessary to suspend the sprint session or the race, the clerk of the course will order red flags to be shown at all marshal points and the abort lights to be shown at the line. The next article that we need to explain is Article 5.4, which goes about the full length of a race. You might get confused by the 2-hour or 3-hour timeline, but this article says it all. Article 5.4 says that the minimum number of kilometers that a race needs to have under its belt is 305 kilometers, so that the race itself can be classified as a full one. On the other hand, this article interprets the hours that the racers can spend on the race, saying that should 2 hours elapse before the scheduled race distance is completed, the leader will be shown the end of session signal when he crosses the line at the end of the lap, following the lap during which the 2-hour period ended. However, in order for this to happen, the race should not be suspended in the event of the full amount of laps not being completed. If a race is suspended, then the timeline is extended to 3 hours, as we've seen in Monaco when the race started behind the safety car and we had a timeline counting down. Let's compare what happened in Japan. The race started but was suspended almost immediately with Sainz committing a crash after aquaplaning. After this, there was a 2-hour delay with everyone waiting for the rain to clear up. This time was added to the existing race time, the equivalent of 2 laps, which left us with a total of 40 minutes until the 3-hour period was up. Basically, we received a sprint race that was dominated by Verstappen and Leclerc, folded at the last corner to receive a 5-second penalty for cutting the chicane on Perez. Nevertheless, it was an interesting race, and the most important thing was when the drivers are going to change from the full wet compound tyres to the intermediate tyres. The restart of the race was mandatory to be completed on the full wet tires, but although they are good in keeping your car on the track, when there is heavy rain present, they are very slow, and that has been pointed out by many F1 drivers, which is why they have changed almost immediately to the intermediate tires, and drivers like Latifi, who did this among the first drivers, managed to finish in the points for the first time in this season. According to the last article, which is 6.5, if a race is suspended in accordance with Article 57 and cannot be resumed, points for each title will be awarded in accordance with certain criteria. These points are awarded based on what percentage of the race has been completed, and the Japanese GP was completed for 52.8%. This means that according to Article 6.5, the points that were going to be given to the drivers would be from column 3. If this was to see the light, then Verstappen would have been granted 19 points, Perez 14 and Leclerc 12. Verstappen needed to be 8 points ahead of Leclerc and 6 points ahead of Perez to be crowned world champion in Suzuka. This, of course, does not meet the criteria, and Verstappen would have to wait for the next GP, which would be Austin. Why didn't the FIA implement these points from column 3, but instead decided to give the full amount of points to the drivers? Well, Article 6.5 says it all. If a race is suspended in accordance with Article 57 and cannot be resumed, points for each title will be awarded in accordance with the following criteria. This would mean that if the timeline was interrupted by unfortunate events such as crashes or even heavier rain, then the article and the rule would have seen the daylight. This is something that even Red Bull and Verstappen failed to interpret correctly, and the Dutchman had to be reassured twice that he had won the championship. Basically, for you to understand things easily, the race ended with Verstappen, the leader at the Suzuka GP, going first through the finish line and not under any red flags. If the scenario was similar to the one in Spa last year, when the racers completed barely 2 laps under the safety car, then we would have seen points being awarded to drivers in accordance with Article 6.5. The 2022 rules that we saw being implemented this season had one sole goal, and that was to prevent situations like 2021 Spa happening all over again. When the 2021 Belgian GP finished the way it did, after practically not even starting, it was evident that changes had to be implemented to the system in these delicate situations. The FIA did come up with a perfectly good solution, but they didn't apply it in accordance with the article because the circumstances didn't comply. With that being said, it's evident that there is nothing controversial about Verstappen's title, and the dominant season that he's had just goes to show that we are seeing pure dominance from the Dutchman, so there is no need to take it away from him. As for Leclerc's penalty, many tried to blame the FIA when it comes to being super fast with giving away penalties just to help Max's case. Leclerc himself said that the 5-second penalty was the right thing to do, as he closed the door on Perez after going wide in the last corner of the race. With that being said, what do you think about the FIA's decision? Let us know in the comments below.